Did you know that kinky wellness is integral to your self-development? Hi, welcome to The Partition, home of kinky wellness, the ultimate destination to explore the integral connection between kinky wellness and your personal development. I'm your host and kinky wellness coach, Dana Sugar, and I'm here to show why kinky sexual wellness deserves a rightful spot within the wellness conversation. So let's strip away the shame and taboo together and have an open conversation about it. Hey, and welcome back to the Partition Podcast. How have you guys been? I know it's been a while, so hope you guys have been good and keeping it kinky. And I, of course, am fashionably late to releasing this podcast once again. But don't worry, the wait will be worth it because now I get to share what I've been getting up to. So since we last chatted, I've done a couple of major things, but the first thing is that I finally finished the Kinky Wellness textbook. Yes, I know, but I finally did it. And truth be told, that is the real reason why I needed to take a break from the podcast. Because truthfully, I couldn't keep up with doing both. But the wait is over and I couldn't be more prouder. And I know you guys are going to love it because when you purchase the Kinky Wellness textbook online, it comes with a separate file where you can have all the worksheets in it so you don't have to print off the entire book. Plus, this lets you update and change your worksheets over and over again as your kinky wellness journey evolves. I specifically designed this textbook to be full of interactive work pages and easy to follow frameworks that's going to take you through kinky wellness one step at a time. So as you're going through it, it's going to feel that I'm right there beside you. And from the feedback that I've received so far, the worksheets that are taking fan favorites are the mapping a mental placing and outlining your desired outcomes. If you want to check it out, you can find this on my new website, which is, drumroll please, www.kinkywellness.ca. I have changed from the partition over to www.kinkywellness.ca, and you can find the textbook under courses and services. But of course, the link is in the description. Also, while I was taking a break, I did a total gut job on that website. So if you want to be part of the evolution of sexual health and healing, head on over to kinkywellness.ca. I honestly love the new website so much, and it's way more reflective to where kinky wellness is headed. So yeah, go check out the website, go check out the book, but that's not all I did. Over the break, I had the privilege of being invited to attend an immersive online 6-day workshop on something called parts work. In diplomatic speech, parts work is a therapeutic and integrative approach to psychotherapy heavily influenced by something called internal family systems, or IFS for short. Originally, IFS was developed by a man named Richard Schwartz in the 1980s, and this therapy approaches the idea that all of us have a number of different parts within us, and that each have their own feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And at this point, if you've been listening to the Partition podcast long enough, then you already know that kinky wellness supports this idea too, and that although we may have endless parts of ourselves, this specific training showed me that there are 3 key parts that we should be aware of, which are our Exile parts, Firefighter parts, and Manager parts. For this episode, I'm going to be doing a quick brief on what each of these parts are, but I have left the links in the description if you want to complete the Integrative Somatics Parts Work certificate for yourself, or if you want to learn more. So starting with our Exile parts, Exiles are the parts of us that we have pushed away or have hidden for our own protection. Whether that's an emotion or a sensation that we don't want to feel, or maybe it's a memory or belief that we're struggling to process because that too is too painful or brings on overwhelming feelings of shame, anxiety, anger, or any other intense emotion. It is said that exile parts are so deeply buried within us that they typically feel abandoned, devalued, rejected, or marginalized. And since they are often categorized as young and childlike, they often hold our deepest and most vulnerable scars. With my background, I related exiles very much to the concept of your inner child, because often when you're dealing with things that happened to you when you were small, at that time, you weren't able to articulate your needs like how you can now that you're an adult. So this training was a great reminder that sometimes we need to go back to those younger parts of ourselves and remind them that, hey, I'm all grown up now, and I can take care of you in the ways that didn't necessarily happen when you needed it the most. Because, quite frankly, as children, we aren't able to protect ourselves the way we can now. But that doesn't mean that you can't go back within yourself and ease that pain and distress of the things that have previously happened. It just takes a little imaginative visualization. So, to work with your inner child or exile in this case, you have to first acknowledge that you have one. I think sometimes we often forget that we're not just the version of ourselves that we currently are right now. We are also all the versions of us that happened before. So you might be 55 now, but you're also your 35-year-old self, your 15-year-old self, your 5-year-old self, your 5-month-old, 5-day-old, and even 5-minute-old self. So recognizing all of the stages of yourself will help you understand that your inner child exists and that these past experiences can, will, and do influence your current emotions, behaviors, and how you view the world. So, by honoring and nurturing the younger versions of ourselves or exiles, we not only heal old wounds, but also cultivate a more integrated and compassionate sense of self. The second part of ourselves that we need to be aware of are our manager parts. Our manager parts help us with every aspect of our lives. They help us get out of bed. They help us get us to our jobs, our appointments, and overall help us function in our day to day life. The positive sides of our manager parts is that they are incredibly proactive and very, very loyal. However, when our manager parts become overwhelmed or burdened with a traumatic event, they will do everything in their power to prevent us from getting in that same situation. The problem is we are not fortune tellers, so we cannot see the future. So sometimes our manager parts will get triggered and react thinking something bad is going to happen when in fact that's not the case at all. So things that can happen when a manager part is acting out of fear or possibly overwhelm, it can show up in ways of being very rigid, controlling. You become hyper vigilant towards the environment and the people around you. And other characteristics of an overwhelmed manager is that they can be very criticizing and they will often over intellectualize things instead of feeling them. So if you are someone who can easily maybe articulate a traumatic event that happened to you, but you can't necessarily process the feelings, that might just be a manager part trying to ease you the pain. But the problem is when managers are acting out of fear or in need of a survival, they're going to end up crashing because manager parts can't run forever, which brings us to our third part of ourselves that we need to be aware of, which is our firefighter parts. Our firefighter parts are the parts of ourselves that come out and take charge when the managers couldn't resolve the issue and when our exiles feel triggered. Our firefighter parts just want us to be okay and feel better as fast as possible. So these parts of ourselves are not concerned with the outcome of what they're going to do whatsoever. They just see a problem and they want to fix that problem and make you feel better ASAP. So some strategies that our firefighter parts may use are sedation tactics, disassociation, or distracting us from what's really happening or what we're currently feeling. For example, our firefighter parts may think numbing ourselves through drugs or alcohol or scrolling through Instagram to mentally or emotionally check out is actually helpful. And, maybe one could argue that for a brief moment it might be helpful, but you and I both know that in the long run, any type of sedation, disassociation, or distraction is not going to help us at all. It's only going to make things worse. So it's important to recognize that when our firefighter parts come out, it's a clear sign that there's still a lot of deep work that needs to get done. So some key things that I took away from when I was learning about firefighter parts is don't try to manage them and don't try to debate them. Because when those parts of ourselves are activated, it means that they're already trying to not feel shame or pain or any other negative, overwhelming emotion or thoughts. So you just want to be able to listen to them and make sure that they feel heard and seen. Also, it's said that firefighters are often protecting our exiles, and our exiles are our most vulnerable parts. So, when you take that into consideration, the firefighter within us is just going to be this fierce, strong protector. So, when it comes to this, it's best not to poke the bear even further when they are out. But one of the great resources that we were given regarding Firefighter is the range of the behaviors which they use. So, one of the things that they showed us was a scale that showed, quote, soothing behaviors to stifling behaviors. And in short, the more trauma someone has, the more stifling the behavior needs to be to not feel so bad anymore. So, starting on the soothing side, firefighters can use relationships, work, shopping, sex, exercise as a way to cope. And then in the middle of the continuum, they could use electronics, sleeping, indulging, or limiting food intake, or things like gambling. And on the more stifling side, our firefighter parts could use drugs, alcohol, raging out, partaking in self injury behaviors, excessive risk taking, and experiencing panic attacks, or in the most extreme cases, suicide. Now, it's important to note that if you are experiencing any of these, to seek help because help is always out there. You don't need to suffer in silence or alone any longer. In the description, I have put a link to the Wikipedia page that has a list of almost all the suicide lines out there in the world. So make sure to reach out if you need help. Now, as outlined by parts work, our managers and firefighter parts are both protectors, and any part of us that falls under either of these categories has a reason for why they're acting out the way that they are. Even if it looks chaotic or even harmful on the outside, our protector parts truly believe that they're actually doing something good for us. We just need to learn how to communicate with them better if this is the first time that we're addressing them. Which brings me to another key takeaway that I got from this experience, which is something called the 6Fs. Now, the 6Fs was a major part of what we were studying, and I'm just going to be highlighting it right now about what they are. And basically, what it is, it's an outline on how we can talk to not just our manager or firefighter parts or Exile parts, but really, I found that you could follow this format to talk to any part of yourself. So the 6Fs goes as followed: find, focus, feel, befriend, find out, and fears and concerns. During the find stage is where you want to identify the part you want to work with or talk to. Once you find the part, then the second F is to focus on it. And this is where you narrow in on that part. And that part can begin to take a shape, either as a person, maybe it's a color, a shape, an energy, but you're starting to focus more so it's a visualization for you. For feel, this is when you explore how you, of course, feel towards this part. Does it make you angry? Does this part make you sad, disappointed? Does it motivate you? What type of feelings does this bring up? Which can be quite complex because other parts of you might kind of have their own opinions and you have to separate these parts. And in the training, they called that unblending, which is a huge part of that because we do sometimes have a ton of voices in our heads all talking at the same time. So it's about taking those pieces apart one by one and getting to the root cause. And when you get kind of further into that part, that's when you can begin to befriend it. Now, the fourth F stands for befriend. Befriending is the stage where you are open and non-judgmental towards this part of yourself, because once you're able to befriend that part, that's when you can get to the fifth F, which stands for find out. For finding out, this is where you ask questions about the part and find out more about it, like what it wants, who it thinks it's helping, why it's upset, what it would rather be doing, all of these different stages. And through this stage is where you can get to the 6F, which is the fears and concerns. And during this phase is when you typically find out what is actually, like I said, protecting and why it's truly there. And when you can kind of hear that part of itself and hear the fears and concerns, that's when it feels validated, which can be a really big, tremendous breakthrough in your healing. Now, although this was literally the simplest explanation and really it was just what this 6F stands for, it really is such a powerful tool in how to talk to ourselves more kindly and certainly more empathetically with more curiosity, which is really what we're ultimately trying to do, is be curious about ourselves to see ourselves to the depths of what we can be, right? Now, overall, I generally love the training, but I did have to take some training and do some preliminary training videos before I actually even did this one. So within those videos, sex was mentioned, but it was only mentioned once and it was mentioned under something called legacy burdens. Now, in short, legacy burdens are burdens that have been passed down through generations above. And while, yes, I do agree that it's not technically wrong, I do think that sex is very much part of legacy burdens. I also had a part of me that thought that this is just another example of how society really only views sex as either a medical thing or as a negative thing. And I find that when we emphasize only the burdens or the traumas associated with sex, it only continues this cycle of shame and misunderstanding around it, making it harder for us to engage with our sexuality and curiosities in a healthy, fulfilling way, even within settings like this, in a therapeutic setting where we should be able to talk about sex in a more positive light. And seriously, like I am not a therapist, but I have yet to run into a modern day therapeutic modality that views sex as such a profound form of expression, healing, and intimacy. And again, although sex can and is often a form of legacy burdens, it is also so much more than that. And I think that we should have institutions realize that and kind of open that up and share some light on that as well. So, yes, I agree that it's time that we start recognizing sex as a source of healing and connection, because when we do, like just by acknowledging it, we're going to be able to dismantle any legacy burdens associated with it as well. But again, overall, I absolutely love the workshop. I had a great time, and I couldn't be more grateful for attending this parts workshop because, as you guys know, I'm always down to learn more on any type of healing just to share it with you guys. But yeah, also right now, I just want to give a quick shout out to Nova Phoenix Counseling Services for making this happen. Oh, Laura, you are an absolute gem and the best, and you have such a beautiful and dedicated team of healers. For my listeners, if parts work resonated with you, I totally encourage you to check out Nova Phoenix Counseling Services, regardless of where you are listening from, because Nova has a fantastic team and they can work remotely or in person if you are listening from the Niagara region area. And of course, all contact details will be in the description. But that's it for me on my first episode back. I hope you guys have a fabulous rest of your day, and I will speak with you next week. As always, stay kinky.